this tank is one of the most dirty vehicles at tier 8, and it's because it's absolutely brilliant, and it is some of the most fun that I can have. And even when you play in tier 10 games, and you'll actually want to find yourself in tier 10 games in this tier 8, which makes it completely different from a lot of the other vehicles in the game. Of course, this is the Iron Rain, the tier 8 German tank destroyer that is an absolute nightmare for opponents to come up against. And why is that? Well, of course, it looks exactly like the Rheinmetall Borsig Waffenträger, and that is because it is the Rheinmetall Borsig Waffenträger, but this one has something a little bit special. Now, looks pretty much the exact same, has the similar sort of statistics, has the 12.8 centimeter that the Borsig has, but this one is, yeah, like we say, a little bit different because it has a 3-shot autoloader. This is an auto-loading Borsig that has all of the attributes of a Borsig, but just has that auto-loading gun, which makes the Iron Rain one of the most dangerous tier 8 tanks in the game because it has 490 times 3, equaling 1470 total damage that you can deal within a very small amount of time, with only an intricate reload of 2.7 seconds considering how much alpha this tank has. Yeah, pretty horrible for opponents to come up against, and if you can track opponents, if you can keep them locked down in place, or if they're in an open field, the Iron Rain snacks upon them. But what have we done with this tank to make it even more outrageous, and how we've been able to have some of the most ridiculous games in tier 10 games? And yeah, and that's what we're going to be showcasing in the gameplay portion in just a second. But number one, we are running a full camo build in this vehicle to make it a complete stealth machine. We of course have 461 meters of view range with 195 meters of still concealment. Millimeters? Yeah, definitely not. But this tank should have 195 millimeters. It feels like it anyway. But this is absolutely outrageous as to how well this thing can stay undetected with this build, and that is ultimately what you want. You want to be able to fire off all 3 of your shells, not get spotted, and take none in return. That is like the peak in which this vehicle can perform at. But we've also gone with the power system in the way of getting the traction system so that we can increase the speed of the vehicle and of course increase the chassis and whole rotation speed so that we can move around the map a little bit easier and do it a little bit better, because all of the other equipment, you can't use ventilation, you can't use stabilizers, you've got a load of other equipment that you can't use in this thing. So when it comes to performing in the Iron Rain, I always pick some form of engine boost, whether you go with the advanced powertrain for the extra horsepower or the actual traction system for the pure max speed increase in the chassis. Now we did go with that in the end, which means that we have a top speed of 38 kilometers an hour. It's 35 kilometers an hour base, which means that, yeah, overall still going to be a very, very powerful tank, since you can relocate, and of course you're never going to get spotted when you're relocating for the most part. Now, one perk that I would always recommend in your tank destroyer like this, which you're trying to become super sneaky, is silent driving, because this reduces the effect of driving on your vehicle's camo factor, which means that when you're moving, you don't get that huge bloom like you would with other vehicles. And that's because it decreases it by 55%. So when you are moving, you are 55% less likely, you're going to decrease how much that circle blooms out by 55% essentially. So it's a really, really good way of remaining undetected in your stealthy tanks, and it's actually kind of underrated. And of course you can get the camo expertise, which makes you 10% better camo. You've got muffled shot, which increases your chances of staying hidden when firing in bushes, etc. Same with green thumb, etc. You've got situational awareness for more view range, sixth sense, steady aim for the increased accuracy, which is amazing, and of course rapid loading for increased damage per minute with this vehicle. So yeah, overall this is the build we've gone for, but of course there's enough talking about it. Let's actually see it in action, and see it in action in a tier 10 game. Now then, this tier 10 game is on Heilbronn, and Heilbronn is a map that is very, very good for the Iron Rain. And although we start off by sitting at the back, not doing anything, obviously gone for a toilet break or gone to go and get myself a snack, but that leaves us with a little bit of information that we can talk about at the beginning, and that is that when you get into a map like this where you have tier 10s on the enemy team, the Iron Rain is actually not too bad because of course you do have the penetration values of 311 on those premium rounds and 246 on your standard rounds, meaning most vehicles you come up against are going to be absolutely fine. You're not really going to have a problem when you're playing in something like this with regards to penetration. It's more actually about the aiming time of this vehicle. It just definitely feels a little bit lackluster, and when you look at the shell intra-clip reload, so how fast those shells go out, so how fast you can fire after firing the first one or the second one to connect the next one, the aiming time is actually longer than what you would see with a than you can actually reload. So you reload before you can aim in fully, so it's kind of one of those things where although the intra-clip reload is good, it can be a little bit annoying when you're at further distances and you're trying to snipe at certain places in the game. So just be aware of that if you do decide to play. Now, one position, I don't know if you guys watched the stream recently, but I actually said about that there was a position that I didn't realise was actually a thing. And that position is this one right here. Now, it is very risky and I wouldn't recommend it for the majority of players. But you can see here, we have got some dirty angles on people that go into this position on the enemy team in F7. And I never knew that it was possible to actually take some damage. Now, granted, this is what happens if you do go into a position like that. I'm obviously feeling a little bit worse for wear. We've just lost 800 hit points, but don't worry, because at the end of the day, these things happen and you've got to try them out, and that was what I was primarily after. Now, this position, it can still work, and I've used it multiple times within the game to have some really good spots. Now obviously that can happen if you go too far forward, if you start trying to move. Of course, wargaming slidey rock mechanics are always a bit of a pain, but you can abuse the mechanics sometimes to get into positions like that. But this game, a very slow start, as you can see. I mean, you guys are seeing how slow it's been. We're not fully aiming here, but I'm going for the shots in the KV4 anyway, since we are aiming just to unload the clip. There's no point in having one shell in the magazine in the Iron Rain when it comes to if you're stuck and you haven't really got anyone to shoot at. You might as well just try and get a blind fire or something like that, since you're not really low on rounds anyway. So, you saw me earlier. I still think that this position is interesting, and that's why I kept going. Why I went back up here was not because I was thinking, I'm going to fall off, or I want to get the best game possible. I wanted to just see if this position is usable, because yeah, after seeing what happened at the beginning, I'm not thinking it is. But can we get up here? Now we can, and that means that we can auto-aim a Death Star and manage to pen him and take him out of the game. So this position is usable. I'm a little bit wary of people that are going to be down in the dip over to the right, and I'm also wary that if we do get spotted up there, it is curtains. I mean, it's a very situational position, and you definitely don't want to be doing what we did at the beginning. So it's definitely not one of the things you should be aiming to do, but it's there in your arsenal for if you ever need it, or you think that you'll be able to get away with using it. But either way, we now move into this bush, and this bush is the ultimate bush in which you can sit in and basically find some people who are going to push out from where they are right now. Maybe they're going to aggressively attack the hill, and that's exactly what the Iron Rain does. Now, this tank is one of the ones that will perform way better if you're sitting at the back. Not necessarily all of the time, because you want to move in during games where, you know, you're winning or whatever, but it's one of the ones where you don't push in. You're not a aggressive heavy tank. You're not going to be pushing in. You're not going to be trying to, you know, become the ultimate in TD, like aggressive warfare. It is a stealthy tank that should be played in a way that you can pull back, you can hide in some bushes, you can move forward, you can change to a different bush and surprise opponents and come away with 1500 damage essentially if you pen all three of your shells. So that's something you should always be thinking about. Now in this game, as I say, it's a slow burner, 1300 damage, and it looks pretty bad at this point, I won't lie. It looks like we're going to lose. It does not look good. But what does look good is finding the side of a Centurion AVRE. Now, I'm a little bit scared about firing at him, and instead we go for the Action X. And we managed to pump 2 rounds into him, and then hopefully we can get 1 onto the AVRE, but we don't manage to do it. And unfortunately, Behemoth, whatever you want to call it, manages to get away. But maybe we'll be able to remove him later on. And this is exactly what you want in the Iron Rain in terms of like positioning of enemies. They're all pushing up, they're all trying to get into a nice position, and we're just sat in a bush undetectable, making sure that we don't overcommit or overpoke or shoot when someone's right next to us, since we don't want to get spotted. And if you do get spotted when you've only got 380 hit points left in a tier 10 game, you quickly get removed. But what quickly gets removed is a KV4 and the TVP's health, hopefully. And there you go, all 3 shots land and connect for 3,700 total damage. But now I realise, the enemy team are getting awfully close, and with only 2 teammates left, it's time to leave. It's time to get the flying F out of here, and we decide to get all the way over to this tank destroyer over here, and hopefully we can support our friendly tank destroyer as he's getting YOLO'd. But what we do is we get into a bush. And if we can get into the bush, that is ultimate, because we sit behind it, we use the bush mechanics. Obviously, they don't work anywhere near as well as on PC. For those of you that are interested, you still get spotted even if you do have bushes behind you. But we set the chieftain on fire and finish him off to manage to get him out the game for 4,500 damage. And then we managed to find the little pesky AVRE, who, of course, we don't manage to pen. But we've got 6 APCR rounds left, and we're going to just sit back and hopefully be able to reload. If the game ends here, I'm okay with doing 4.5k damage. It's okay. I'm not going to complain. But we would obviously like to win the game, and it is possible to win with tanks like this and with all of the enemy team being on low hit points. But the enemy team are not playing like absolute scrubs, and they are coming from both angles, and it's looking like they will end up closing us down at some point. So yeah, not looking all too good. And with a Conway on my team, he does have a decent amount of hit points, so maybe if we can trade him or manage to help him out in some way, then we could get away with it. But we find a TL7 black on the enemy team pushing up, and we put 1 into him, we put 2 into him. Can we get the final? And of course, unfortunately, we do fire as he gets taken out by our teammate there, the Gorilla 15, which is a little bit annoying since we could have maybe saved that shell and tried to go for the blind fire on the AVRE. But doesn't matter, we've now got an 18-second reload, and hopefully the Conway can deal with the tank destroyer that's pushing him quickly before he gets taken out himself. And unfortunately, it's a Foch 155. That is not ideal. Not a tank you want to be getting pushed by. And maybe we'll be able to get at least 1 or maybe even 2 shells off before we get taken out, and help out the Gorilla for getting him as much of a possibility of getting as much damage as maybe he can. But unfortunately for us, it's not looking good. The AVRE misses us very closely, and then the M46 manages. I'm already trying to turn, and yeah, unfortunately the Foch 155 finishes it off. But yeah, not particularly the best result in terms of did we win, but at least we picked up 6,300 damage, and it was an absolute great result in the Iron Rain. And yeah, with this being a premium tank, results like this can grant you stupid amounts of silver, especially if you're running ×2 silver bonuses with a vehicle like this. But of course, we come second even on a loss in a tier 10 game for playing in this premium tier 8. And there you go, we picked up 130,000 silver on a loss, and without using ×2 silver boost. A mastery badge, no surprise there for that much damage and combined damage. So yeah, what, 7,600 combined damage. Not bad in a tier 8 tank destroyer in a tier 10 game. But let's have a look at another one. And then this game is, of course, another tier 10 game, and we are playing on Corellia, one of the maps that is great if you want to stay hidden. Yet again, a brilliant map and a brilliant matchup. And of course, we do manage to track that tier 10 Polish heavy tank for a decent amount of assistance, and we managed to keep him there. And luckily, because the teammates are actually hitting those tracks continuously, it keeps him as a track target that we actually tracked, and therefore we've been able to get 1,700, make that 1,900 assistance from just 1 vehicle. And in that time, we've been able to reload now, and there are 2 heavy tanks at tier 8 and 9 on the enemy team. So what better way of removing a VKP than just keep firing at his lower plate with premium? So yeah, not particularly the nicest, but at least we've got a decent chunk of actual damage so far, with pulling over 3,700 combined damage in a very, very easy start to the game. I mean, literally just sitting way out of render range, or not render range but view range, and of course you can see the mini circle on the minimap showcasing how small it is compared to our view range. So basically no one is going to be able to outspot us when you're playing in an Iron Rain, and that way you can use that to kind of guide yourself through a lot of the games and sneak around the map and that sort of stuff. So really good start, and of course the game needs to move on. At this point I was messing about trying to sort out a speaker, so wasn't particularly paying that much attention, and that is exactly what the Iron Rain does well. It's a very casual tank. You don't have to pay attention 100% of the time, and I feel like that can't really be said for a lot of tanks in the game, and it really is essentially something that you can use in your own games. I set auto drive on here just whilst I'm messing around, because you know, why bother playing when you're in a tank like this? And yeah, obviously not the best idea when you're playing in World of Tanks, and I wouldn't recommend you doing this ever. But if you are playing in and you are not really wanting to focus 100% of the time, the Iron Rain is definitely a vehicle you can use in your own game. So either way, what we do here is try and make our way over to where the opponents are going to be, which is pushing the one line. So if we can get on top of the hill, that will be ideal. And we're making our way over that way now. So having done what we did at the beginning, obviously doing what we're doing now is not the best idea, and yeah, you can see that I'm preoccupied, but that's really what I kind of find interesting, is that, you know, this is probably 90% of people in the game, maybe like on average, because, you know, people are casual players. They're not always focusing 100% of the time. If you've got children, if you know, have people to talk to, people busting in, asking you questions, blah blah blah, I'm sure that, like, you know, you can't focus 100% of the time, and some tanks are better at being able to do that than other tanks. And of course autoloaders are usually better because you can just sit behind a corner and do something whilst you're waiting to reload, and of course you can't do anything most of the time. Now I'd never recommend like not playing 100%. If you're wanting to do good, obviously if you want to do good, you should be playing the whole time. But yeah, like, just making sure that you keep your wits about you, and tanks like this can certainly help you out in that regard. You can see here the Super Conqueror managing to give us his side, and will quite kindly take away the last remaining bit of his hit points. And that essentially is our game. I mean, that's the game done, so we may as well essentially skip forward after we track this T28 and manage to get a little bit more assistance damage, and we end up perking ourselves up on top of this ridge for the thumbnail, obviously. And yeah, hopefully you guys did enjoy that little replay. So we'll skip ahead to the results screen here, and of course there, the victory screen. Essentially, the best thing about this tank is, of course, not needing really to care about being in a tier 10 game, having that long reload where you don't have to be 100% focused all of the time, and of course having the high alpha damage with that auto reloader, or auto loader even. So yeah, really fantastic vehicle, and able to earn a ton of credits too if you're focusing with this tank. But other than that, hopefully you did enjoy the Iron Rain, and if you want to check out any other vehicles, then I'll leave a link to the gameplay and tank reviews playlist that should pop up on the screen. And of course on the left there'll be the most recent tank review as of the release of this video. But thank you very much, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.